Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. In this episode, we talk about the Indus Waters Treaty. We also give you an update about a hunger strike by engineer turned activist Sonam Wangchuk. But first, we talk about the latest economic survey. Every year, a day before the budget is announced, the government releases the economic survey, which is meant to tell us about the state of the economy in the past year and the challenges that lie ahead for it. The survey is the most authoritative and comprehensive analysis of the economy that is conducted from within the union government. In this segment, Ishan Bakshi, who writes on the economy for the Indian Express, joins my colleague Shashank Bhargava to talk about what the survey has revealed this time.
Ishan, could you begin by telling us what the survey tells us about how this past year has been?
Okay, so let's rewind the clock, right? I mean, let's look at the main economic developments over the past year. You had the fallout of the Russia-Ukraine war, right? I mean, the ripple effects are being felt across sectors even till now. So the economic survey is being presented at a time when there's global macroeconomic uncertainty as well. There is tightening in the Western world that is happening. Interest rates are shooting up. That also has to be factored in. So in this context, the economic survey has projected that the Indian economy will grow at about 6.5% in 2023-24. This is a tad slower than what it expects growth to be in this year, that is 2022-23, which it expects at 7%. So this is broadly what the survey had said regarding growth this year.
And do we take 6.5% to be a good sign when it comes to growth?
Given the context in which we are currently in, with which the economy is currently operating in, is a slowdown anticipated in the West across most developed economies in the West.
Yeah, in fact, many are predicting a recession.
Yes. Whether that materializes and to how much extent the slowdown actually is, we'll get to know shortly. But if you look at the projections that the IMF has released today, it now expects the Indian economy to grow at 6.1% in 2023-24. That's on a much lower slide compared to what the economic survey does. Independent assessments by economists at Crystal and Nomura also project the Indian economy to grow at a much slower pace than the economic survey. So in that sense, you could say that the economic survey is being slightly optimistic because the global macroeconomic environment is very challenging. You have the US central bank raising interest rates. You have rates going up in Europe, in UK. You have the Western world slowing down.
Because they basically want demand to go down.
Yeah, because inflation, their primary concern is inflation at the moment. And that is going to impact India's exports. It already is. If you look at the data for the last few months, export growth has slowed down dramatically. And that has ripple effects across the economy.
Okay, so with this projection, the government is basically saying that despite our exports taking a hit, we still expect to grow at 6.5%.
Yes. So look, if you look at the drivers of growth, right, you have consumption, domestic consumption, you have investments, you have government spending, and you have exports. Exports is a very big driver of growth. In 2022 and first half of 2023, exports was a big driver of India's economy. We virtually had an export boom, if you can call it that. When you take that away, you only have government spending, investments, and private consumption to drive growth. If you leave aside government spending, to what extent private consumption and investments can drive growth is very debatable right now. There are indications that private consumption had picked up. Part of it can be attributed to pent-up demand. Households did not spend during the lockdowns, etc. Services, not much spending was done because of contact-intensive services. Slowly, you had these restrictions on economic activities being released, and you had household spending more. You saw this pent-up demand in the economy being released, right? To what extent that is sustainable going forward, we don't know. The economic survey seems to believe that this demand, this pent-up demand, this release is sustainable. It believes that will drive growth. Second point is about investments. For quite some time, private investments have been very sluggish in the economy. There is reason to believe recently that there has been an uptick in recent months. Now, again, to what extent that is sustainable is very difficult to ascertain now.
And when you talk about private investments being sluggish, could you talk about why that has been the case?
So there are a lot of reasons why an investment cycle will not pick up, why a certain investor will not invest. I'll give one very basic example point. There's a lot of uncertainty in the economy, right? So if I was an investor and I was supposed to invest, I wanted to invest, say, 100 rupees. My decision will be based on the expectation of the economy 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line, where I see the economy, what do I see as returns on my investment. Now, if I'm not sure, if I'm uncertain about the prospects of the economy going forward, I will be hesitant to put my money in the economy, right? I will be hesitant to launch a new plant, a new showroom, or whatever. To that extent, uncertainty plays a big role. So unless you're an investor, a corporate house is confident of being able to recover that money, they will not put that in. Households, MSMEs also invest, right? But their decisions are based on certain other factors. So there's also how much money banks are capable of lending, how much money corporate houses can raise and given their balance sheet. So there are a lot of decisions, a lot of indicators, a lot of decisions that go into deciding where to and when to exactly launch investments. Uncertainty has been one of them. There is this technical thing called capacity utilization. Let me just elaborate on that. If a plant has a capacity to produce, say, 100 units of footwear, and you're currently producing at, say, 80% capacity, that means you're producing 80 shoes. Typically, what we have seen is that when capacity utilization starts going above 75 to 80, corporates start the next investment cycle. So they'll start planning the next plant. Now, the RBI surveys tell us that capacity utilization is at that level or is at a 10-year high or above the 10-year average, something of that. And we are seeing some additions, some capex in the pipeline. New project announcements are also rising up. But whether it reflects or is indicative of a broad-based pickup, I mean, we are yet to know for sure.
And Ishan, what does the survey tell us about the challenges that the economy is going to face going forward?
So the big challenge is the external slowdown, right? The slowdown in exports and what happens there. That is the biggest challenge. The second, I would assume, is private consumption. Whether it is sustainable, whether investment demand is sustainable, right? I mean, there's not enough evidence to my mind that there's a broad-based pickup in investment activity. The survey has sort of listed down all the steps the government has taken over the last few years, including various reforms like the IBC, GST, etc., etc., and has sort of made the case that we are perhaps on the cusp of a growth cycle that is similar to what we saw post 2003, where we saw this rapid boom. Right? It's possible, but there is not enough evidence, according to me, of a broad-based pickup in the investment cycle.
So basically, if we don't have our exports in place, we can't rely on private consumption and even investments alone to hit that 6.5% mark.
It's going to be difficult. Because also you have to keep in mind that government spending in the economy is also a big chunk, right? Now, the Indian government, central and state, have been on bringing down their fiscal deficit, which had gone up during the COVID period because they borrowed more to spend and etc., etc. So to what extent government can consolidate, that means bring down its borrowings, while at the same time provide a boost to the economy, right? Through capital expenditure, blah, 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 investing in roads, bridges, etc., etc. We'll get to know. So that also is a very integral part.
And based on this optimism, what do you think we can expect from the budget this time?
So that's a bit tricky because this is the last full budget before the general elections in 2024. So to that extent, there's room to maneuver. But at the same time, the finance minister is constrained by the fiscal deficit path. I mean, he needs to bring down the fiscal deficit to more manageable levels. At the same time, the trend over the last few years has been to ramp up capital spending, which is a very positive thing, right? This year, I think the target was about 7.5 lakh crores, if I'm not mistaken. Just the center, states is separate.
And when we talk about capital expenditure, one big problem we are targeting through that is unemployment.
It helps, right? I mean, any sort of government spending in the economy has a multiplier effect, right? If the government spends 1 rupee, private sector activities start and there's a multiplier effect throughout the economy, right? So any investment activity is good for employment generation. So to what extent the government, while keeping its finances stable in check, can manage to kick this even further, right? Capital spending further. That is the challenge. And to what extent? The reports seem to suggest that they will continue to ramp up capital spending, which is a very positive development if it happens. That we'll get to know.
And Ishan, based on this economic survey, is the government thinking that whatever problems we had faced due to COVID 19, economically, they are now behind us?
The survey seems to think so. And it has said, I'm just paraphrasing here a bit, that we have recouped the losses, we have emerged stronger, and we're on the path, something to that effect. So there is a view in the government that we have recovered from the pandemic and there's no need to worry about that anymore. The lingering effects, some people are still alluding to. To that extent, yeah.
And next, we talk about a shared water body and a border issue between India and Pakistan. On 25th January, India issued a notice to Pakistan for the modification of the Indus Waters Treaty, or IWT, which is a bilateral agreement signed between the two neighboring countries in September 1960. Despite the tumultuous relationship between the two countries, this Waters Treaty survived the test of time. But now, India is looking to modify the treaty, which may add to the strife. In this segment, the Indian Express's associate editor, Shubhajit Roy, explains why India wants to modify the treaty and what could be the consequence of this demand. So, Shubhajit, can you first tell us what is the Indus Waters Treaty?
So the Indus Waters Treaty, it was signed on September 1960 by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and then Pakistan's President Muhammad Ayub Khan in Karachi after almost 9 years of World Bank brokered negotiations between India and Pakistan. Now, the treaty defines the water sharing arrangement for 6 rivers of the Indus basin that flows through from both India and Pakistan. So it has broadly 12 articles, 8 annexes. Under the treaty's provisions, India can make unrestricted use of all the water of the eastern rivers. So the eastern rivers are Satluj, Beas and Ravi, while Pakistan is supposed to get water from the western rivers, which are Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. So that's broadly the treaty is about. It has been a pretty durable document over the last 6-7 decades because water sharing, despite the politics behind it, it has survived the wars and the terror attacks and the tension between the two countries.
And can you explain why we needed this treaty in the first place?
So essentially, because after partition, there was a fear in Pakistan that India might be blocking river water, and there was a lot of noise at that point of time about the tension between the two countries because of the riots that took place post partition and the immense sort of migration that took place. So at that point of time, the two countries, leaders of the two countries, they decided it's best to have a stable, predictable regime of river water sharing. And at that point of time, the World Bank had stepped in and they gave the undertaking and they played a role in brokering the negotiations. So that's how this this Indus Water Treaty came about.
Right. But now India wants to modify this treaty. So, do we know why?
Yeah. So right now, India is constructing 2 hydroelectric power projects. One is called the Kishan Ganga hydroelectric power project, which is on the Kishan Ganga river, which is a tributary of the Jhelum river. And another one is called the Ratle hydroelectric power project, which is on the Chenab river. Now, one is, I think, 330 megawatts. The other one is about 800 odd megawatts. So put together, there are about 1100 megawatts of power they will generate once they come online. So Pakistan has objected to both these projects, citing concerns of that water flow might be affected and those kind of issues. So India has an Indus Water Commissioner and Pakistan has an Indus Water Commissioner. So initially, these concerns were expressed at the Indus Water Commissioner's level. India responded, but Pakistan was not satisfied. So in 2015, Pakistan asked that a neutral expert should be appointed to examine its technical objections to both these power projects. Now, it is as per the treaty, so there is a graded dispute redressal mechanism, graded and sequential. Essentially, first you talk between the Indus Water Commissioners. If it's not resolved, then you escalate it to this something called a neutral expert, which is appointed by the World Bank and to which both parties, both India and Pakistan, have to agree. So the neutral expert will try to sort of resolve the issues. If it doesn't take place if it is not resolved by the neutral expert as well, then there is a third layer which is called the court of arbitration. Now, Pakistan first asked that a neutral expert should be appointed. Then in 2016, it retracted on that request and proposed that a court of arbitration should adjudicate on its objections. Now, this unilateral action by Pakistan is seen by India as violating the graded mechanism. It's like they approached the High Court and then they withdrew the request on the High Court and they've gone to the Supreme Court. So to put it simply, so that is the sequence one has to go first. So Indus Water Commissioner should be seen as a trial court, neutral expert should be seen as a High Court, and Court of Arbitration is the Supreme Court.
Okay, but if there is a precedence for a graded approach, then the neutral expert and arbitration request obviously couldn't work simultaneously, right?
So World Bank acknowledged this in 2016 and took a decision to pause both processes, these parallel processes. Now, from 2017 till 2022, there were discussions between the two Indus Water Commissioners, India and Pakistan. Pakistan refused to discuss the issue. India would say, let's take it to the neutral expert. Last year, in March last year, if I remember correctly, World Bank initiated actions on both the processes. They said neutral expert as well as a court of arbitration. India sort of objected to it, but in October, the World Bank named two experts, Michelle Lino as the neutral expert and Professor Sean Murphy as chairman of the Court of Arbitration. So in October last year, the World Bank started the process, both parallel processes, so to which now India and now the meetings have just started on both the parallel processes. So that's where India has now objected and is saying that this is a violation of the treaty and this is a confusing ambiguity in the redressal mechanism that you're trying to twist the interpretation of the treaty. It might become legally untenable if both produce contradictory judgments, findings. So it has asked that the treaty should be modified.
And Shubhajit, do we know what kind of modification India is looking at?
So far, that's not clear yet. India has just said modify the treaty. Now, the issue is it is not saying that modify the treaty of the dispute redressal mechanism clause only. It is not saying that. So that means that other articles or other clauses of the treaty are also open for renegotiation. It might include the water sharing, how much water you should give, what not to give, which river you should give, which river you should not give. So that means the entire treaty's text is up for renegotiation if this modification process goes through. What has happened right now, India has sent a notice of modification. Indian Indus Water Commissioner, he has sent to his counterpart in Pakistan and saying that let's start modification of the treaty in the next 90 days.
And have there been any comments from Pakistan's side regarding the modification?
Yes, there has been. So Pakistan basically has said, that the court of arbitration process has started and India should abide by the process. So that's what they have said so far.
Okay, and Shubhajit, from a geopolitical point of view, what sort of impact will this have on the relationship between India and Pakistan?
So you see, as I said earlier, that This Indus Waters Treaty has survived 3 wars between India and Pakistan, plus the Kargil conflict, plus numerous terror attacks that has caused tension. So, despite all the tension, this is one treaty that has survived and the test of time. So, for the first time in 62 years, this treaty is up for amendment. That means that there is one more outstanding issue between India and Pakistan that's being reopened, which was considered to be settled and closed. And now the argument also is that in 62 years, what India has said, that there have been lessons to be learned. Essentially, it can be political lessons, it can be climate change. Because of climate change, rivers might have shifted, the basin might have shifted, or there might have been new things might have come up, tributary, the water content might have reduced. So, keeping in mind all those factors, the treaty needs to be updated. Also, India and Pakistan, while it has held that the treaty has survived despite the wars, there has been political rhetoric in recent years, especially from the BJP government and Prime Minister Modi himself. He had said after the Uri attack that blood and water can't flow together, essentially hitting out at Pakistan and giving an indication that the treaty might be renegotiated, might be reviewed, might be relooked at. So I think it will be important to see how politically this and diplomatically this particular treaty is seen, and that will be the biggest test of India and Pakistan's diplomacy in maintaining this treaty despite all the tension. It has to, whether it abides by or renegotiates the treaty.
And in the end, we give you an update about a hunger strike by education reformist Sonam Wangchuk. Magsaysay Award winner Sonam Wangchuk on Monday completed a 5-day fast to safeguard the glaciers, mountains, land, and people of Ladakh by demanding the region's inclusion under the 6th schedule of the constitution. A one-time staunch admirer of PM Modi and strong advocate of the 2019 abrogation of Article 370 in the then Jammu and Kashmir state, the climate activist said that the administration in Ladakh is, quote, trying hard to sow seeds of militancy in the peaceful region, unquote. In a YouTube video, he also demanded statehood for Ladakh as people aren't happy with the way the UT is being managed.
फिर लद्दाख में ये 3 साल से ये जो यूटी का प्रशासन रहा है वो काफी नाकामयाब रहा है, लोग बहुत दुखी हैं। लद्दाख तो अब परमानेंट गवर्नर रूल में है, यहाँ किसी का कोई नहीं चलेगा, एक प्रशासक चलाएगा, ऐसा हालत हो चुका है। तो दूसरा मांग अब जनता का ये हो चुका है full statehood.
A few days ago, on January 21st, speaking from Khardungla, he posted another video on YouTube addressed to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Saying Ladakh and the Himalayas are known as the third pole after the North Pole and the South Pole, Wangchuk reiterated the long-standing demand for including the region under Schedule 6 of the Indian Constitution to safeguard the environment of the region and the rights of the indigenous people. The 6th schedule under Article 244 of the Indian Constitution provides for the formation of autonomous administrative regions called Autonomous District Councils or ADCs. These have some autonomy on legislative, judicial, and administrative matters within a state. ADCs have up to 30 members with a term of 5 years and can make laws, rules, and regulations without regard to land, forest, water, agriculture, village councils, health, sanitation, village and town level policing, etc. Currently, it applies to the northeastern states of Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, and Tripura. Wangchuk, who made the demands for inclusion under the 6th schedule and statehood, also claimed that he is under house arrest for raising his voice. He, however, threatened to intensify his protest if needed. He said, and I quote, "This was just a symbolic protest. And if there is no response, I will go on a hunger strike for 10 days, later 15 days, and so on till my last breath." Unquote. You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by Utsa Sarmin with the help of Anwiti Singh and Shashank Bhargava. It was edited and mixed by Abhishek Kumar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at @Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.